and share the PowerPoint deck. Welcome everyone to this, I would like to call it a special edition of the UC Easy webinar series. My name is Vinny Gupta and I'm a co-founder of UC Easy. There are several people on this webinar that are current UC Easy clients, but a lot of people that are not UC Easy clients. So I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to introduce UC Easy. To the UC Easy clients, I request your patience while we do so because you're obviously intimately familiar with who we are. A few housekeeping things before I get started. We are going to go until about 5 p.m. Pacific time. The structured content, we will try to keep it at about 35 minutes or so because this topic is so new, or so we believe, to most of the attendees. We are going to leave a lot of time for question and answers. Now, the important thing, a couple of things from, again, housekeeping. Please type your questions in the Q&A tab in the toolbar on your screen. That should typically be at the bottom of the screen. And I will try to answer those questions offline, or David Campos, our other presenter, he will try to answer those live verbally when he's done. Please do not type your question in the chat window because David will not be monitoring that. If you have any housekeeping questions, for example, you cannot hear audio, please type that in the chat window, but questions, please put those in the Q&A window. Lastly, there is an option there for raising your hands. That option is generally not going to be used, so unless you want to have fun with that, there's not much point in doing that, raising your hand. So with that, let's jump into a very quick UC Easy introduction, and then we will get into today's agenda. So as I said, I'm a co-founder of UC Easy. The name of the company stands for University and College Admissions Made Easy. And this company was specially founded to make children from first and second generation immigrant families. Children from first and second generation immigrant families, to make those children the most competitive that they can be for admission to US colleges. That's the mission of our company. For folks on the call that are not UC Easy clients, you can check out our website, uceazy.com, or through the website, you can request a free consultation with us in which we can explain to you how our programs work. Our primary solution is personalized college admission counseling, one-on-one sessions, or private counseling, or call it guidance, through college admission experts that can guide you and your child from grade 8 onwards. That's how early our programs start, but we will welcome you in any grade whatsoever, starting from 8th onwards. Again, you can go to our website, uceazy.com, to learn more. The last point I wanted to make is that we are a social business, meaning that while we are a business, we have a social mission of helping students from all immigrant families, regardless of their income level. So as a part of that, we have an initiative called UC Easy Giving Back, through which we try to help students from first generation immigrant families that are low income. We provide them with completely free help. You can learn more about this at UC Easy Philanthropy on our website. I'm going to actually stop sharing this and share one picture with you from a different screen. David, can you see my?
Yes, I can see it perfectly, yep.
So now this screen onwards is applicable for UC Easy clients as well as non-UC Easy clients. Through our journey of trying to help or to work with first and second generation immigrant families, what we realized is that the needs are very different from, say, a Caucasian family whose ancestors may have come from Italy 200 years back, or even an African American family that may have been in this country for hundreds of years. The difference being that the parents are familiar with the US high school system and in a lot of cases familiar with the US college system. So until now, what we used to do is two things. We would do lots of seminars and webinars to educate immigrant families with the US college system. And we used to offer one-on-one guidance, what I talked about 30 seconds back. What we realized in working with hundreds of students, hundreds of families, is that that is not enough to meet our mission. David, you might want to mute yourself if you can. Thank you. So what we realized in working with a lot of students from first generation and second generation families is that this stuff here is not enough. One of the huge competitive disadvantages that our families, and I am a first generation immigrant myself, that our children face is that we cannot guide our children on the US high school journey as compared to, say, a hypothetical Mrs. and Mr. Smith, a Caucasian family that has been in this country for 100 years, ancestors and all that. So we have expanded our solutions and we are constantly going to expand those. We will do whatever it takes to meet our mission of making your child the most competitive for US colleges. So today, what we're going to talk about, today we are launching this webinar series for parental education. This, as our presenter, David Campos, I will introduce him in 1 second. This is going to be a 4-part series, today being part 1 of 4. And the goal is to bring you up to speed on different aspects of the US high school journey. Today's webinar is not about college admissions per se. Today's webinar is about informing you about US high school so you can guide your son or daughter in an informed manner. And by doing that, remove the competitive disadvantage that your child has versus this hypothetical Mrs. and Mr. Smith. And the last point, as we expand our guidance for immigrant families, is that we are working on a program for development of creative writing skills. We realize that that's a huge issue for a majority of students from immigrant families. I believe almost 90%. This ultimately shows in your SAT writing, and it shows, more importantly, this deficiency shows up in the college essays that are written in 12th grade. So we're going to be launching a program. Please stay tuned. Our internal target date is January 1 for this. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. Let me quickly introduce your primary presenter for today, Mr. David Campos. So David Campos, he's going to be taking you through the rest of the webinar today. You can obviously see his video. So David, something about him, and he will introduce himself to you a little bit more. David has been with UC Easy for a while. His day job is, and that's what's important to you today, his day job is as a school counselor. So he's been a school counselor with US public high schools for over 10 years. Through that role, he's worked with thousands of students. So he is fully experienced to address the topic for today. So he's been, I'll let him provide additional details about himself, but in addition to his credentials as a school counselor and a college admissions expert, his big achievement in life, which is why he's a great role model for all our children, is that he got admitted into every single college that he applied to. David Campos himself is a second-generation immigrant. His parents came to this country for college, just like a lot of us did, right? And he's a second-generation immigrant, but he's done so well, got admitted to every single college, went to Stanford. So he's going to be your host for the next 25, 30 minutes. Welcome, David.
All right. Thank you very much, Vinny, and welcome everyone who's tuned in today to learn a little bit more about the public system that your sons and daughters attend every day. So right now I'm going to share my slide deck. Give me 1 second. Vinny, can you see my slide deck?
I can, David. I can, though. The top of the head is getting a little bit outside the frame. This is great.
Better? Okay.
Maybe just sit up a little bit.
Sure. So just to reiterate a couple of points, besides the public schools and the acceptances and such, not only am I second generation to go to high school in the United States, but my wife is too. And you'll notice a picture of us in the background. We were at the Harvard University Club in San Francisco in a library format, which is very, very fitting because my wife, who is an immigrant to this country, went to Harvard, and I went to Stanford. And obviously, we spent a lot of time in the books. And that is why I think this picture can capture a little bit about myself. So today, let me cover a little bit of an overview of further webinars that you guys will be invited to. And this is the series from topics 1 through 4. Today, we'll be discussing how does one navigate a high school from a parent perspective and from a student perspective. Our second topic, which will be in the future, is going to be about an academic pathway to success. Our third topic will be some of the social and emotional influences that a high school student may have in their lives, such as stressors and other things that are external to what a student is experiencing. And finally, the last topic, which will be life outside of the classroom. That will be extracurriculars, navigating the hierarchy of a high school, how to get your demands met in nice professional and very effective ways. But the message overall in our series is that all of our counselors in UC Easy provide this social, emotional, and academic piece. And that is what makes us unique. We are here not to just educate the student academically, but holistically in all their social, emotional, and extracurricular needs, in addition to help them preparing for their academics. So this is what our series will look like in the future. And today's topic will just give you an overview of all of that. Okay, today our topic is transitioning into high school. As one can imagine, there are a lot of expectations that the teachers, administrators, parents, and even students hold over themselves. It is new to some in the sense that grades are not the only expectation. There are exams, including the SAT and the ACT, and there are the demands of coming prepared every single day that a student is at school, because even though they are not tested on quizzes or exams, or even standardized exams, sometimes they are observed in terms of teachers' expectations of them, teachers' feedback, and things that might come back to help them in terms of letters of recommendation. So teachers are very observant, and so are we as counselors. So those expectations have increased from middle school. Some of the challenges will be school and life, social life, and extracurricular life balance. Some peer pressures, some getting the courses that are desired versus finding courses that one cannot get into because of the challenging of scheduling, and getting along with people along the way, such as administrators, teachers, and other faculty at the school that are trying to serve the entire school and not necessarily just the individual at every second of the day. So that navigating is going to be very important to understand. And finally, part of the goal for parents and for students is to help your student have a growth mindset, in the sense that he or she is able to grow from their experiences and not be pegged down by prior expectations or beliefs, but keeping a mind that is open to extracurricular activities, open to seeking and receiving help, giving help in the form of service, and just frankly understanding that it's not always easy to get what one wants in a public high school, but there are definitely ways that one can strategize and get those needs met. Also, confidence, academic confidence, and emotional and social confidence also are key that we will talk about in future webinars, and the persistence of always trying to get the support and necessities along the way with the help of the many different people on campus. And we will talk a little bit about that. Okay, so the first thing I want to start out talking about is the structure of the school day. In a traditional school, classes rotate 6 times, and in non-traditional days, such as the block schedule, which I experience, is a student might have 4 classes, 4 being on one day, and on a B day, possibly 4, or just traditionally 4 classes overall. And that traditional schedule that is called a block schedule is probably the best example of what will be experienced in college. Okay, so as you can imagine, there are passing periods where students have from a range of 5 to 7 minutes to get from one class to another, and sometimes it can be punitive being late to one class just because tardies are always kept. Attendance is a huge factor for students just because teachers and the school as a whole need to have an accountability as far as where they are at all times. So you will notice summons through mail or phone as far as tracking this attendance. So that is a huge component of the school day that is sometimes overlooked if your son or daughter has perfect attendance. But for some, attendance can be a very, very big issue. And next one, some classes are 80 to 90 minutes, and that is in a block schedule. And then other classes, of course, are 60 minutes or 55 minutes. And during that time, it's not all content. Sometimes it's in-class work. Sometimes it's students distracting one another through cell phone use, which is obviously can be punitive as far as docking a student's participation in class. So there are a lot of things that are going on in class other than just core content being taught. There are a lot of distractions, and checking in with your son or daughter about some of these distractions can be very useful in the sense of knowing what was covered and what was learned in class. Sometimes you may run out of time in class, and a lot of information might need to be studied or learned on one's own. So that is something to keep in mind. After students go to class, they also have time during the middle of the day, typically during lunch, where they are meeting with clubs. And so sometimes students are nonstop going from one academic thing in class to another during their lunch periods. So sometimes breaks are not always possible. Students will meet with their club on a regular basis, depending on the number of clubs that they attend and are a part of. So that is also sometimes a thing that takes away time for studying or preparing for the next day in any way and doing homework. So keep in mind that clubs are probably occupying a lot of your son or daughter's lunch times. And then finally, during the school day, students can often meet with teachers before and after school. I put this one last because I think it is one of the key factors in schools, is that I would mention that it's very common, and I think also extremely encouraged for students to seek out their teachers before and after school. Not only for extra help, but also to get the teachers, get to know them very well in the sense that they're forming relationships, not just getting content. So always encourage students to seek out teachers before and after school, especially when preparing for exams, essays, and other homework assignments. That is very key in terms of keeping up with grades. So the structure of the school day is something that I would ask your son or daughter about, just so that you can understand what is going on daily. The classroom. So in a classroom setting, students, of course, are requested to take notes. Some students are asked to keep binders and folders that are extra neat. Some teachers will use that as part of the grading system. And of course, staying on task is huge. May not be a problem for all, but it can be a problem for some of the students in the class, such as the side conversation and cell phone use that I just alluded to. Participation and displaying confidence. This piece is about raising one's hand, asking questions, and doing that for the sake of knowledge acquisition. Teachers are very vigilant in knowing which students are participating regularly and which students are going to be the ones that lead the classroom discussions or ones that display knowledge content. content of book knowledge or just current events or other things they read. And point number 2 is a point that I would make and tie into letters of recommendation. When a teacher understands that a student is participating and a teacher understands that this student asks great questions and participates well, that is a thing that will come and serve a great purpose when they are applying to colleges. And this comes out in the letters of recommendation. So this classroom participation and of course individual discussions that are had with teachers are very, very important. Also, knowing one's surrounding. So this is also the point of going beyond just the classroom setting and asking for help, going beyond the academic setting and talking about maybe long-term goals, majors, the teacher's journey through college and how a student can learn from these things. And all these questions and all these dialogues that a student can initiate, and usually they are student initiated, can come back to help them as seniors when they're asking for letter of recommendation. Okay, and the final point about this is not only understanding what it takes to get an A, but displaying that a student really, really seeks out knowledge, seeks out questions, and wants to get extra help as opposed to only going to class to get an A. So one thing to consider is when in the classroom, have your students participate, but also understand that the questions and the comments need to be directed not only inside the classroom, but outside of the classroom. And that relationship needs to be built outside of the classroom as well. One thing to note in the classroom as well is that teachers often give varying degrees of homework. Whether the class is an honors class, a regular class, an AP class, the teacher's expectations are going to be known from day one. So always look at a student's syllabus to better understand when key deadlines are coming up and what is expected of them. And not all homework is graded with the same weight. Sometimes homework could be a small percentage of the grade, and sometimes, such as math, testing, or in science, testing can be a huge, huge form of the grade. So be aware of what the teacher is expecting and have those conferences with teachers as often as one would desire. Teachers getting to know students is very important, and teachers understanding parents and the role of the family is also very important. So please feel comfortable and confident that asking questions of teachers and having that relationship formed outside of the classroom can be done by both parents and teachers. Also a note for understanding teachers is that there are a lot of different styles and ways of explaining content that teachers have. Sometimes that fits the student's demands and sometimes it doesn't. So one needs to understand that there is a larger scheduler that is part of the scheduling that counselors and other administrators do, and that is not their choice to put your son or daughter into typical classes. It's sometimes just random. And teacher changes are not something that can always happen. That is often a complaint that I hear from parents, but navigating the system and learning to deal with all types of teaching styles and all types of personalities is very, very important. So keep that in mind. And then a lot of the learning, I would say, especially students who are in the 9th grade, will start to realize that a lot of learning and studying comes upon one's own time. It doesn't necessarily happen at the school, and it's not always intuitive that going to class will get you a good grade. It requires lots and lots of studying. And teachers know this, but I think younger students need to start expecting that. And then the piece I mentioned earlier is seeking help outside of class is going to be not only enriching for the academic success, but also for the success in the college applications. Okay, so I want to consider teachers as allies from a parent standpoint and a teacher standpoint. And anytime your student is solution focused, that is the key message that I would have for parents, is find solutions to challenges, not complaints. And use time after school, before school to set up meetings with teachers, or have your son or daughter do the same. And remember that the solution is what the school wants to see and not the concerns and the complaints. So always work with the teacher to find solutions if at all possible. Okay, outside of this classroom, we talked a little bit about lunch, participating in clubs, but part of observations that I have made as a counselor is I can notice that sometimes students stay by themselves or they don't interact with their peers. And I think that's a very, very important aspect of high school because it can be a stress reliever as opposed to using the 8 or 9 hours of school day thinking only of academics. So I would highly encourage your students to get involved in clubs and speak with their peers and have fun at lunch or during breaks because that's an important part of building the whole child. And you can imagine that sometimes students don't always like going to class. Not that that would happen to your students, but there are people that skip. There are people that want to influence your son or daughter. So make sure that you check in with them and make sure that they're going to class and using their time wisely. So that's something always good to follow up on at the end of the day or at the end of the week. And sometimes many students do not commit themselves to activities outside of the school. I mention that because when one looks very critically at the college application process, a lot of the activities need to be outside of the school. So don't think that just clubs on campus or just activities on campus are the end-all be-all for entrance into college. That is actually something that I think a lot of students don't realize. It's the stuff that you do outside of your comfort zone that is actually sometimes more important. So my final comment about this slide would be is think globally. If you can do service or do activities that reach a wide variety of people, that is more beneficial to the long-term goal of entering college than just going to clubs and participating. Even though it's consistent, it doesn't necessarily bring about a huge impact in the community. So think of community impact as the main message when using time outside of class. And stress and other social and emotional challenges will be discussed in a future seminar, but I just want to talk a little bit about the rule that teachers present, not only at the college level, but at the high school level. Students often are expected to do about 2 to 3 hours outside of every class for every hour of class. So in a given week, students could range from 3 to 5 hours or 6 hours of school approximately in class. That means that they're going to have to double or triple that time in order to develop good study habits. So if one is studying 15, 20, 30 hours a week, that is by all means very much expected. So understand that it's not just going to class that makes a successful child, but it's also studying, doing laboratory work, reading ahead, and doing things well beyond the classroom. So as you can imagine, stress is going to be very high in some situations. And that's what we are here for as counselors in UC Easy, is to help maintain that and give strategies on how to do that so that not all time is spent academically, but also some time is spent developing one's resume. Okay, so we all know that getting an A at school is, in some schools, Cupertino, San Ramon, and some other schools where sometimes AP classes are even more difficult than some of the community college classes. We know that is very, very key. And what I would recommend to parents is check in with your student. I always like to check in with my UC Easy students and say, give me on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed are you? It's okay that they are 7 or 8 stressed on a scale of 1 to 10. But sometimes when students are not stressed, that is also an indication that they may not be trying hard and they may not be trying and reaching their full potential. So that is something to check in with. And I think something that I like to do a lot because then I know what the student's true potential is. Honors and AP classes. So a lot of teachers are concerned with results, just like standardized tests. They want to make sure that students are doing well and will pass their exams. So of course, these classes can be very, very rigorous and add a lot of stress to students. So there is a rule of thumb for some counselors who want you to balance AP and honors classes, but for every AP and honors class that you take, that may mean that you are spending less time outside of class on extracurricular activities. So it's very, very key to go over coursework selection and talk to your sons and daughters about how much stress they feel and how much they can take on when they are set with the challenge of AP and honors classes. And finally, within stress, some students understand the importance of going above and beyond the school for extracurricular activities, and that is going to bring a lot of stress too. So this slide is very, very key in the sense that it's going to be an expectation that stress is going to be felt throughout the journey, but you want to check in with your students to help them relieve some of that stress. Maybe give them some other social avenues that can help them relieve that, and check in with them to make sure that they're not feeling overwhelmed, saddened, or depressed because of this stress.
David?
Yes.
If I can just, before you go to the
Sure.
next slide, if I can just quickly add a editorial commentary on the previous slide.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a parent of two kids who one of them has finished college, the second is in college, and someone in my family actually has been a AP teacher for the last 20 years in the US high school. So all this is pretty close to me. So to the parents on this webinar today, I would like to make just a very humble request to you that, and I'm appealing to the parents that are first and second generation immigrants here, that in some of our most competitive communities, say in the Silicon Valley area, our children are just not being able to cope with the stress. And when I said that, I'm not making a loose statement that is not fact-based. Several schools have these publications, student organizations have these publications which have a collection of anonymous letters from students. As a parent, I would urge you to read those. The reason I'm saying that is when I first time, as a first generation immigrant parent, when I read those, I cried because the amount of darkness that is there is scary. So please don't make an assumption that if your child is not complaining, everything is fine. So as a parent, keep those antennas up for stress that the child is not managing. And like David said, we would have a completely dedicated session where we might even have panels that will talk about examples of unhealthy stress, how it manifests itself, and what you as parents can do about it. David, back to you.
Sure. Thank you, Vinny. That is a great point. So some other things to consider within the stress is, of course, studying and how to organize oneself. So my first point about this is that students need to learn from a very, very early time that advocating for oneself can be very beneficial to the success. And that means going before and after school, raising your hand during class and asking for help, using homeroom periods, using any material that a teacher can recommend as far as going above and beyond the coursework. So advocating for oneself is very important throughout high school, and hopefully freshmen can start learning that very quickly. And spending time wisely. I am a proponent of getting ahead of some of the coursework, reading ahead in math, reading ahead in science, understand what is going to be tested well in advance. So studying and organizing time is very important, but when you get ahead, that to me is a sign that you can understand how to manage your time, but also reduce the amount of stress that may come in the future. Key things for freshmen, but not everyone learns this immediately, is that there are two levels of work. You can do all the homework in the world and spend all that time, but understand that in a lot of classes, homework is only about 10, maybe maximum of 30 to 40% of one's grade, because typically tests and study time is the key to success. So understand that homework is often a very small amount of the percentage that students are graded on, and studying needs to be the key factor as far as time use. Habitual study, review, and repeating well in advance of a test day, maybe 1 or 2 days, 3 days in advance, 4 days in advance, because it's the cram sessions and the procrastination that usually is the cause of some poor testing. And finally, parent encouragement is very, very important. I always recommend that parents check in with the student and say, hey, how are you doing on this extracurricular activity? How are you doing in this club? Is there something that you're doing beyond high school, the high school, in terms of service or education that you want to pursue, or summer programs? Check in and encourage students to do things that are well beyond their high school campus, because usually those activities are probably going to be viewed as the most important to some schools, such as your UCs, your Stanfords, your Harvards, because everyone has access to clubs and other events on campus, but it's the students who find out other events and other ways to use their time that are truly going to benefit from their four-year experience. So my message for this slide would be to develop successful strategies to manage time. Develop strategies to add extracurricular activities that are very, very helpful to one's career, or a very useful dedication of time, as opposed to doing many activities that are not always going to help one develop long-term. Okay, just some quick social norms that happen at the school and sometimes can affect how students interact with one another and how students perceive the world around them.
David, I'm sorry to interrupt in mid-sentence, so just 5 more minutes if you can.
Sure, that sounds good.
Sorry to interrupt.
So, really quickly with the social norms, and this is a known webinar that we're going to have in the future, is understanding how relationships can evolve and make healthy and not so healthy choices and influence students in ways that you may not always be aware of. So checking in on the relationships that are formed during high school is going to be very important. And understanding how bullying, social media, rumors, texting, and all these other behaviors can also detract from one's education. And that exists, and it exists at all high schools. So it's definitely something that one wants to check in on if a parent wants to be very much involved in the education process. Depression, also key. There are a lot of mistakes that are made in a teenage years, and that is okay, but it's the resiliency of the student that is really key to the whole journey. So this topic, again, will be covered in another webinar, so I don't need to go into too much detail here. School events. These, I would call these are the stress relieving events at school. Going to dances and sports and hanging out on social media and hanging out with friends. These are usually consequences of students having free time and using their time well to develop the whole student as opposed to just focusing on the academic side. Involvement in these activities can also be very satisfactory for students who want to relieve their stress and not have to focus on developing a resume or studying all the time. So just keep in mind that these school events are very key to the development. And extracurricular activities. So students are typically juggling a lot of these activities, but colleges know that there are some activities that are better suited for students and show more depth in a student than just the activities that are on campus. So keep that in mind. Going off campus can have a lot of value. Following the norms of peers. Sometimes students are caught up in doing what their peers want to do, but it's the individual path that I would say is the key component of setting yourself apart during the high school years. Doing things that are not common, that other parents are not talking about, that the community is not talking about. Do something unique. And that is why UC Easy stresses so many different seminars. Going to these seminars, it can be useful to understand how one might interact with a UC Easy counselor and what strategies that UC Easy counselor will help students and parents develop. So keep in mind that extracurricular activities are very important to the student, and it's always good to strategize with others, such as counselors, teachers, and other people involved in a student's life. Okay, quickly, I just want to cover some of the key factors, key people at school. Of course, your public school counselor is a very, very important throughout the journey in helping students select courses and also writing letters of recommendation at the end of the journey. So parents, these are usually your first stop on campus. Please, please ask your counselors questions. Get involved in your son and daughter's life and ask anything that comes to mind. There are always good questions, and always feel free to ask anything. There is no such thing as a bad question. And this is very important for first generation parents, is because these questions can help your student from day one if you get to know that counselor very well. So there are large caseloads, but always make sure you take your time to ask the counselor's question. As a counselor, my philosophy is if you are helping the family, helping the parents, that is the key to some of these students' success, because it's the parents that are in the backgrounds encouraging students at every hour of the day. So integrating your lives with the counselor's life is going to be very important for parents, not only for the students. Okay? And the administration, they're also very much on your side as well. So getting into the administrative office can be key, because they are also the people that make all the executive decisions on campus. They're the influential figures that are looking at behavior, student culture, and leadership on campus. So getting to know them and their expectations on campus is very important. So get to know them, ask them questions too at parent-teacher nights, and understand that they're there to help you just as much as teachers and counselors are as well. Okay? Some takeaway points for this webinar and of future webinars. School has its challenges, and the key for a parent and a student is to understand all the small nuances that go into a student's schedule, daily schedule and after school schedule, because the students should be using their time wisely and asking for help along the way. And parents can be very, very key in helping students navigate the difficult challenges at school. Parents also want to check in quite often to see how the student's doing emotionally, doing socially, and encourage students to set foot outside of the classroom and outside of the studying and participate in other activities that are very key. So also monitoring the stress levels will be very important. So please, as a final message, don't ignore signs of frustration, sadness, and always feel free to check in with the students, because they always have something to share, even though they may say, oh, I don't have homework. Oh, I didn't really learn anything at school today. Or school's going well. Dig deeper if at all possible, because that will be very, very key in helping your students navigate such a challenging 4-year process that can only be made easier if you get involved in their counselors' lives, their teachers' lives, and of course, are serving to ask them encouraging questions that will lead them on the way. That is my conclusion. And Vinny, I'll let you share your slides next.
Great. Thank you very much, David. That was helpful. So to the audience, David will take questions. Unfortunately, we cannot hear you, just like we can't see you. So if you can type your questions in the Q&A window, David and I will take questions. And we also started a poll just to get your feedback. So while David, while the audience they actually sent in several questions that I already responded to.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of, since you are a school counselor, what are some of the questions that first generation and second generation immigrant parents ask you?
I would say the most common has to do with the schedule. A lot of my first and second generation parents ask about the question of, how can I plan for my student to get the best classes possible? And one of the strategies I feel is very important is sometimes the more AP classes that you can take frees you into having choice in your schedule. Because if you take a general ed class that every student is required to take, there's not a lot of control in who you get as a teacher and what the class is going to teach you and how rigorous it is. So sometimes I like to help students from first generation families and parents talk about strategies on getting the perfect schedule. To me, that's very important, because they also have questions about what are activities that students can do. And my conversation always talks about stuff that is off campus, that is well beyond the Cupertino High School or the San Ramon High Schools, but in the communities that are in the Bay Area, and how to use the communities to your advantage. So I think course selection and activities are probably the primary questions that I get from aspirational families who want to help their kids get into college, basically.
So there are several questions in the Q&A window, but before you get to that,
sure.
I've always loved doing this to ask counselors, because I live in a community with a bunch of first-generation immigrants. What do you as school counselors, what is your pet peeve, or what do you think what would you hope that we knew so that your life becomes easier and their life becomes easier?
I think one of my pet peeves is that students come in and ask questions about scheduling, or how can I get the perfect teacher, or how can I do this academically? But I'm a little frustrated in the sense that most of my time is problem solving smaller things such as classes or teacher personalities or other smaller details such as relationships and quarrels and social media problems on campus. But I don't often have conversations about students' careers or students trying to plan their long-term futures or students talking about college well beyond their senior year or asking great questions about how can I improve my resume or how can I improve myself as a whole well beyond the senior year. I get a lot of questions, of course, senior year, but by that time, it's very much too late. So the conversation that starts freshman year and continues sophomore year and continues junior year, those are the opposites of sometimes what I get. And those are the things that I would encourage. Start the conversations early and often, but about some of the stuff that are bigger than just courses, bigger than just meeting one's needs and getting an A, stuff that's well beyond that's going to help you plan for your future. So I think the questions that are small, such as teacher this, teacher that, I don't like this class, those are usually the conversations I get as a counselor, but those are the ones I don't necessarily like to hear. I want to hear more of the holistic approach. What can we do to better the student as a whole?
Okay, got it. Thanks for that, David. So there are several questions in the Q&A window. Let's try and see how many can you get to. But again, given the nature of the audience, let's please read the question patiently
Okay.
and explain that answer. That's why these parents.
Sure. Okay, the first question that I have, please give an example of an extracurricular activity that is outside the school. That is a great question. So extracurriculars outside of the school. To me, the easiest ones to start with are community service. Making sure that the community service in some way relates to your major. So let's give an example. So if a student is going to pursue something in mathematics or physics or engineering, well, one way to showcase math talent is to go and teach math to a younger generation, such as middle schoolers or even younger. And I think an example of that would be going to a community such as maybe the Haywards, the Oaklands, the Richmonds of the Bay Area, or of course in other communities, there are parts of Los Angeles or parts of Sacramento that may have less resources. So there's no better use of one's time, in my opinion, than doing service for others, but also practicing such things as teaching math. In teaching, you always improve your abilities in math, and teaching physics and teaching computers, whatever your passion is, try to teach it because that service can be of utmost importance to improving your community. That would be one example. Another example, of course, is doing pre-college type of activities, maybe at a Berkeley or a Stanford, and going beyond just taking community college classes. So those are just a couple of smaller examples of how to expose one to extracurricular activities that are beyond high school. Okay. Here's another question. Vinny, can you hear me?
Yes, David. I was on mute, but I can. Yes.
Perfect. Yep. Okay. The difference between an AP and an honors class. Okay. AP classes are typically offered at all public schools. That gives a student to take an AP examination in the May period every school year. AP Psych, AP English, AP Physics, AP Chemistry, etc. And those classes can give you an advance credits for college, such as 3 units in said language, said topic. And that's what an AP class is. And it's going to typically be more rigorous than an honors class just because there's more preparation for this examination. An honors class is not offered at every high school. Usually the honors or accelerated course is a precursor to the AP and recommended before one partakes in an AP class. So an AP class is going to be traditionally more rigorous, and it's going to have more benefit in the sense that colleges know that it's more rigorous, and colleges also know that the student has the opportunity to take an examination in the May period. So that is very important. One other question. This question is, if students' grades are suffering, then would we be able, sorry, it just came off screen, give me 1 second. If students' grades are suffering, then would you be able to look into and suggest changes that can help the student? Well, I would say traditionally the changes that are the key are time management skills, getting in advance of studying, getting in advance of homework or reading or essays or studying. Usually, if a student is getting ahead of some of these materials, that is going to help them lower their stress and be better prepared for examinations and other ways that they are graded. Another way too is keeping track of work that is completed versus work that is not completed, and knowing that they're in two different piles and being on top of those two different piles and following up on key deadlines. Strategies also are making sure that you're not taking too many AP classes and you're balancing that with extracurricular activities and regular education classes. So those are a couple of strategies that a student needs to be keeping on top of, but also knowing when that student is overly stressed is also a key strategy. Knowing when a student is not stressed is also another strategy too, because if you're not stressed at some level during high school, that also means you're not reaching your fullest potential. So monitoring stress levels as well as homework and study habits will be very key for that. Okay. On to the next question.
So, David, let's
Yes.
take just a couple more questions.
Couple more? Okay.
And then I'd like to wrap up
Sure.
with this.
Okay. So the question is, going to school with at a high-performing school better? Is it better to do that at a high-performing school, or going to a school with a low performance a better option? That is a great question. At a low-performance school, typically colleges like Stanford and Harvard and other Ivy Leagues don't necessarily know much about the high school. So in some ways, yes, that can be helpful. But at the low-performing schools, sometimes you're not offered AP exams. Sometimes you're not offered honors classes. Maybe there are less clubs. There are less ways to get involved, sometimes at lower performing high schools. So going to a high performing high school, which many of the Stanfords and Harvards of the world already know, if a student is doing well in that type of an environment, then it is often very, very useful to go to a high performing school. I'll give the example of the Palo Alto High School and the Gunn High School examples. So when I was at Stanford, there were about 20 people admitted from Gunn and 20 people admitted from high school. Meaning, we know that Stanford knows that there are high-performing students at these schools. Stanford knows that every year there are going to be a handful admitted from these type of schools. So going to these schools and being able to shine in ways well beyond just the academics are also going to be very helpful. So going to a high-performing school and having exposure to these high-quality activities are very important. So there are some pluses and minuses of both, but going to a high-performing school, I say, would probably have its benefits for a long time over, of course, in preparing a student to go to college. Okay.
So, David, let's stop there for
sure, sounds good.
And we'll see. So, I just wanted to just watch the clock here.
Yep.
So, David, can you inform the audience again as to what the part 2, 3, and 4 of your webinar series are?
Definitely. So part 1, 2, and 3 are going to be all about different categories, such as the first one, the next one that's coming up, the academic component. And this is not just talking about schoolwork or SAT work or stuff that students can do in the community college. This is going to be how to balance a schedule, such as honors and AP classes, how to use time outside of school academically in some ways. And of course, we're going to have another webinar on what one can do outside of school purely. And that's going to be more about what students can do in terms of getting what they want in a respectful manner, such as asking teachers questions or counselors questions or administrators questions, or finding activities that are very meaningful and high impact on one's resume, rather than sticking to the status quo of using what's available at the school, such as the National Honor Society or the CSF, which are all great clubs, but not enough when looking at school. And finally, one of the other topics will be about how to manage stress, how to know when students are feeling emotional and other stressors, when they're feeling depressed and sad, when you know that checking in and balancing one's time in terms of activities and grades and all these other things is key, because it's the emotional and physical well-being of the student that needs to take precedence over some of the academic components. So it's being able to get ahead of some of these social and emotional challenges so that one can focus on the key needs, such as the academic and extracurricular needs. That's more or less what we would be covering in the next couple of webinars.
Awesome, David. So we fired up a poll for you to respond to.
Sure.
But in addition, this is for the audience. If you want to provide feedback on, as I mentioned, this is our first such webinar. We would love to learn from you as to what's working, what's not working. What are the, especially for parents, what are the issues at high school that you feel totally blinded about? Help us help you. So we would like to hear from you. So please send us an email at info@uceasy.com if you have any suggestions for improvement. Now, lastly, so the UC Easy clients on the call, if you want to drop off, you can. We really have no more content for you today, and thank you for attending. The non-UC Easy clients, if you just want to hang around, we can share with you how best to engage with a UC Easy counselor like David Campos, if you would like to. That'll just take 2 minutes, and then we will end this webinar. David, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay. So for the non-UC Easy clients, the key message here is that college admissions in the US is highly competitive, and children from first and second generation immigrant families, they are at a disadvantage because we as parents cannot help much. But the second part of that is that public high schools like the one where David Campos is, the student to college admissions counselor ratio is extremely horrible. That ratio, actually, what you see on the screen, that ratio is for student to counselor ratio, but only 1/4 of the counselor's time is spent on college admissions. So these ratios, you need to multiply them by 4. So the average that we use is that across US, student to college admission counselor ratio in our public high schools is 2,000 to 1. If you work with UC Easy, you will get to work with somebody like David Campos, and our ratios are 20 to 1. It's 100 times improvement. Now, the way this works is that we have a team of 25 experts currently that we hope to grow to about 100 in 2 years. And this is one-on-one consultation like physics coaching or math coaching or music with someone like David Campos. And we have a full curriculum, so we will guide you on that. Our programs start as early as 8th grade, but you're welcome to join in whichever grade after 8th. We're currently supporting 500 students, and you can go to our site, uceasy.com, to learn more. This is just a very quick example of our curriculum for different grades. Today on the call, we don't have any seniors, which is a good thing because your college applications are happening. But for 8th and 9th grade, as you see, course selection was one of your big questions today. For 9th grade or for 10th grade, and we help with that. Extracurricular strategy was, majority of your questions were around that. We help with that. All of these are, this list is available on our website in the free resources section, College Admissions Roadmap. The way to work with us is that send us an email or call this number on the screen, and we will schedule a completely free consultation with somebody like David. We will also send you in advance a questionnaire to capture information about the student and the aspirations. Then we will have a free 30-minute session over video, just like we are meeting right now. We will understand your situation, and we will guide you on the best way to work with us, how to select a counselor, all of that. And we typically say you start with 1 hour meeting with one of our counselors, and then decide how you want to proceed after that. To make things affordable for most families, we also have monthly payment plans available. And lastly, for today's webinar attendees, if you want to start with just 1 hour, as long as you order that 1 hour by tomorrow, we will offer you the first hour for $100. This is just an example of what our monthly payment plans look like. So say for 8th grade, this is $80 a month for next 8 months from now until June 30th. So hopefully you'll see that as compared to a lot of your other programs that you do, Kumon or Russian math, these are rather affordable price points. So I'm going to skip all this because we are out of time, but please, on our website, uceasy.com/events, you can look for more webinars and seminars. In the free resources section, you can find recordings of past webinars on almost every imaginable subject linked to college admissions, and we have blogs there as well. So again, please fill the feedback form. I'm going to stop sharing. David and I would like to thank you for attending today. We hope actually that more and more of first and second generation immigrant parents would take this opportunity to learn more about the US high school journey, because we, again, that's what we mentioned early, we totally believe that getting into a US college, into a competitive college, is a team journey. And if you expect your child to be the only one doing the work, and we as parents don't learn about the US high school system, then the team is not going to be the most efficient. So thank you again for attending. Hope to see you soon. Have a nice day, and the rest of the weekend. David, do you want to say anything in passing?
Yeah, thank you for all the parents and even students that might have joined today. I hope this has been helpful, and of course, any feedback would be very, very much recommended. And hopefully we can have you join in our next webinar and learn a little bit more about the intricacies of high school. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks very much. Have a nice one. Talk to you soon.